Imagine a city that has lost its voice. It is London, or perhaps Venice, or Rome. The year is 1665, or 1630. The specific date matters less than the atmosphere. Usually these streets are loud. You would hear the iron wheels of carts, the shouting of market sellers, and the laughter of children playing by the river. But today, the city is silent. The only sound is the tolling of a church bell. Clang, clang, clang. It is a slow, heavy rhythm that signals death. The doors of the houses are painted with a large red cross. Beside the cross, a message is scrawled in chalk. Lord, have mercy upon us. Inside those houses, families are waiting. They are waiting for a visitor. They are terrified of him, yet they are desperate for him to arrive. And then he appears at the end of the cobblestone street. He does not look like a man. He looks like a giant bird. He wears a long, heavy coat made of waxed leather. It shines in the dull light. On his hands, he wears thick gloves. On his head, a wide-brimmed hat. But it is his face that freezes your blood. He is not showing his human face. He is wearing a mask with a long, curved beak. 2 glass circles protect his eyes, making him look emotionless. He carries a wooden stick, pointing it at the ground as he walks. He is the Plague Doctor. Welcome to the London Gritty Chronicles. I am your guide into the dark corners of history. In this series, we are going to investigate one of the most haunting figures in human history. We will look past the Halloween costumes and the horror movies. We will examine the reality of these doctors. We will ask, why did they dress like this? Was it just superstition, or was there science behind the madness? And most importantly, how did these masked men become symbols of control when the world was falling apart? For you, as English learners, this is a chance to build your vocabulary regarding health, society, and history. You will learn how to describe atmosphere, cause and effect, and complex emotions. Let's begin on that silent street. To understand the Plague Doctor, you must first understand the enemy he was fighting. The enemy was invisible. In the 17th century, no one had seen a bacteria. No one knew what a virus was. The word microscope was known to only a very few scientists. When people died by the thousands, society needed an explanation. They blamed the stars. They blamed God's anger. But mostly, they blamed the air. This is a critical term for our story. Miasma. Listen to that word again. Miasma. In historical English and in medical history, miasma refers to bad air. It comes from an ancient Greek word meaning pollution. Doctors believed that the plague was spread through foul smells. They thought that rotting matter, stagnant water, and unburied bodies released invisible, poisonous vapors. If you breathed this bad air, the humors in your body would become unbalanced, and you would die. This theory, the Miasma Theory, ruled medicine for centuries. It was incorrect, but it was logical to them. Because the air was the enemy, the doctor had to seal himself off. This brings us to the costume. The outfit of the Plague Doctor is one of the most iconic images in history. When we say an image is iconic, we mean it is instantly recognized and represents a whole era or idea. The beak mask is iconic of the Black Death. However, here is a historical twist that surprises many people. During the Black Death of the 13th century, the medieval plague that killed half of Europe, this costume did not exist. Medieval doctors wore long robes, yes, but they did not wear the beak. The famous beak doctor is actually a creation of the 17th century. The costume was invented in 1619 by a French physician named Charles Delorme. He was the chief physician to 3 French kings. He was a man of science and prestige. Delorme designed the outfit not to be scary, but to be a complete seal, a shield. Think of it as the 17th century version of a hazmat suit. The coat was tucked into the breeches, the pants. The boots were connected to the breeches. The skin was completely covered. The leather was covered in wax, or suet, animal fat, to make it hard and impermeable. Impermeable. This is an excellent adjective for you. If a material is impermeable, it means nothing can pass through it. Water cannot get in. Air cannot get in. The wax made the leather impermeable to the sticky atoms of the miasma. The doctor was trying to turn himself into a fortress. But who was the man inside the suit? This is where the story becomes tragic. We often imagine these doctors were the best experts in the city. We imagine wise old professors coming to save the day. The reality was different. The wealthy, established doctors often fled the city when the plague arrived. They had country homes. They had horses. They had money. They ran away to breathe the fresh air of the countryside. The men who stayed behind, the men who put on the mask, were often different. They were young doctors trying to start a career. They were second-rate physicians who couldn't find work elsewhere. Sometimes, they weren't even real doctors at all, but former barber surgeons or fruit sellers desperate for a job. They were hired by the city council. They were municipal employees. The word municipal relates to the town or city government. A municipal doctor is a public servant paid by the community taxes, not by the individual patient. This changed the power dynamic. Usually, a doctor serves the patient, but the plague doctor served the city. His job was not just to cure, because curing was almost impossible. His job was to record, to witness, and to control. When the plague doctor walked down the street, he represented the state. He represented the law. He carried a wooden cane or baton. We will discuss this cane in detail later, but for now, understand its symbolic power. With that stick, he could command you to stay back. He could lift the clothes of a dying man without touching him. He could direct the soldiers to lock a door. He was a symbol of order in a time of absolute chaos. Chaos. This is a word you will hear often in history. Chaos means complete disorder and confusion. When the plague struck, the social rules broke down. Parents abandoned children. Servants robbed masters. The dead lay in the streets. Into this chaos steps the figure in the waxed coat. He is calm. He is covered. He is official. But there is still one question that haunts us, the most disturbing part of his appearance. The beak. Why a bird? Why that shape? It wasn't for style. It wasn't to look like a crow, although the citizens often called them beak doctors. The beak had a specific mechanical function. It was an early form of a gas mask. The beak was not empty. If you could slice that leather beak open, you would find a mixture of herbs, spices, and dried flowers packed tight inside. Why? Remember the miasma theory. The bad air kills you. Therefore, you must filter the air before it reaches your nose. The doctor breathed through the beak. The air passed through the herbs, becoming purified before it entered his lungs. It was a desperate attempt to use scent to fight death. But what exactly was inside that beak? And did it work? As we move deeper into this story, we are going to look inside the mask. We will examine the recipes for protection. We will see how people tried to fight a biological monster with cinnamon and honey. And we will see what happened when the people stopped trusting the mask. The silence of the street is broken by the sound of the doctor's cane tapping on the door. Tap, tap, tap. The door opens. The air inside is heavy and sweet with the smell of sickness. The doctor steps across the threshold. He is the expert. He is the authority. But he is also just a man, sweating inside a heavy leather suit, breathing through a cone of dried flowers, terrified that one small gap in his gloves will end his life. The door closes behind him. It is hard to breathe inside the beak. Step into the shoes of our doctor again. He is standing in the sick room. The air in the room is thick and heavy, but he cannot smell the sickness. You can only smell the strong, spicy mixture right under his nose. Every time he inhales, he pulls air through a dense sponge soaked in vinegar and dried flowers. It makes him dizzy. The heat inside the leather suit is rising. Sweat runs down his back, but he cannot wipe it away. To remove the mask now would be suicide. He is trapped in his own protective cage. In Part 1, we learned about the miasma theory, the idea that bad air causes disease. Now, we must look at the weapon used to fight it. The smell. The contents of the beak were not random. They were a carefully engineered chemical weapon. Or at least, the doctors hoped they were. The inventor of the suit, Charles Delorme, left us a specific recipe. He recommended filling the beak with dried flowers, heavy spices, and perfumes. Common ingredients included camphor, cloves, myrrh, rose petals, and storax. These are aromatics. An aromatic substance is something that has a distinct, usually pleasant, smell. In the 17th century, people believed that aromatics could neutralize the poison in the air. If the air smelled sweet and strong, it was safe. If it smelled foul, it was deadly. The mixture inside the beak was meant to be potent. Here is a useful word for your vocabulary. Potent. Potent means powerful or strong. We usually use it to describe drugs, chemicals, or arguments. A weak cup of tea is not potent. But the mixture in the plague mask was incredibly potent. It had to be strong enough to overpower the stench of death surrounding the doctor. But the obsession with remedies went beyond just the mask. Wealthy citizens who did not have a leather suit had their own versions. They carried pomanders. A pomander was a ball of ambergris or musk, often held in a decorative metal cage on a chain. They would hold it to their noses while walking through the market. It was a portable barrier, a mobile shield of scent. However, the most famous remedy of this era was something called theriac. The doctors didn't just smell things, they prescribed medicines. And theriac was the king of medicines. Theriac was a dark, sticky syrup. It was a concoction that dated back to the ancient Romans. Let's look at that word, concoction. A concoction is a mixture of various ingredients, often prepared by cooking or combining them in a strange way. If you mix orange juice, milk, and soda in a glass, you have made a strange concoction. Theriac was a very complex concoction. It contained over 50 ingredients. It included opium, cinnamon, fungus, and, most famously, the dried flesh of vipers, snakes. Why snakes? The logic was symbolic. Snakes are poisonous. Therefore, doctors believed that eating a small amount of snake would help the body build a defense against poison. The plague doctor would prescribe this syrup to the dying. He would coat his own lips with it. It was expensive, legendary, and widely trusted. Did it work? Sadly, no. We now know the plague is caused by the Yersinia pestis bacterium. It is spread by fleas that live on rats. No amount of cinnamon or snake flesh can kill a bacteria. However, there is a strange irony here. Some modern scientists suggest that the strong oils in the beak, like cloves and camphor, might have actually helped, but not for the reason the doctors thought. Fleas hate strong smells. The heavy leather coat was too thick for a flea to bite through, and a pungent smell of the herbs might have repelled the insects. Pungent. This describes a smell that is sharp, biting, or very strong. Onions are pungent. Vinegar is pungent. So, by trying to filter the air, the doctor accidentally created a suit that warded off the true carriers of the disease, the fleas. To ward off means to push away or prevent something bad from affecting you. You put on a coat to ward off the cold. The doctor wore the suit to ward off the miasma, but he was actually warding off the insects. Back in the room, the doctor has finished breathing his purified air. He needs to examine the patient. The patient is lying on a straw mattress, feverish and groaning. The doctor needs to check for buboes, the swollen black lumps that appear on the neck and groin. These lumps are the signature of the bubonic plague. But the doctor does not want to touch the patient with his gloved hands. That is too close. That is too dangerous. Instead, he raises his other tool, the white wooden stick. He pulls back the blanket with the tip of the cane. This cane is more than just a stick. It is an extension of his authority. It is the instrument that allows him to inspect the horror without ever making contact. But as the death toll rises, the people in the city start to look at that cane differently. They stop seeing it as a tool of medicine. They start seeing it as a weapon of punishment. The mood in the city is shifting. The fear is turning into anger. And the man in the mask is about to find himself in the middle of a riot. The white cane descends. It touches the skin of the patient. The doctor pushes gently. The patient screams in pain. The lump on the neck is hard and dark. The doctor pulls the cane back. He does not offer comfort. He does not offer a soft hand. Instead, he turns to the door and nods to the guard standing outside. This is the moment the doctor stops being a healer and becomes a judge. In part 2, we looked at the mask and the smells. Now, we must look at the stick. The cane was not just a tool for examination. It was an implement of control. An implement is a tool or a piece of equipment used for a specific purpose. A pen is a writing implement. A shovel is a gardening implement. The doctor's cane was a medical implement, yes. It allowed him to take a pulse or lift a shirt without touching the infected body. But on the street, it was a weapon. Crowds of desperate people would surround the plague doctor. They wanted medicine. They wanted answers. Sometimes they just wanted to touch him, hoping his magic would save them. The doctor used the cane to beat them back, to keep his distance, to enforce the invisible wall between the clean and the unclean. But the most terrifying power of the cane was what happened after the examination. If the doctor found the tokens, the plague spots, he delivered his verdict. In a court of law, a verdict is the final decision made by a judge or jury, guilty or not guilty. In the plague city, the doctor's verdict was life or death, but not immediate death from the disease. It was a social death. Once the doctor declared a house infected, the state took over. This brings us to one of the most important words in the history of medicine: quarantine. You have likely heard this word recently, but its history is specific. The word comes from the Italian 40 giorni, meaning 40 days. In the 14th century, ships arriving in Venice had to wait at anchor for 40 days before landing to ensure they were not carrying the plague. By the 17th century in London, quarantine had become brutal. If the doctor pointed his cane at your family member, the authorities would shut up your house. They would nail the door shut from the outside. They would paint the Red Cross. And your entire family, healthy or sick, was locked inside together. They were left to die. The plague doctor was the key to this lock. He was the one who identified the victims. Because of this, the doctor carried a book, a ledger. He walked through the parishes, counting. He was compiling the bills of mortality. These were weekly lists published to tell the public how many had died. Every week, the citizens would rush to buy these bills. They wanted to know, is the plague growing? Is it shrinking? Is it in my neighborhood? The doctor was the collector of this data. He turned human tragedies into statistics. Statistics. This is the science of collecting and analyzing numerical data. To the king and the city council, the plague was a numbers game. They needed to know if the tax base was dying. They needed to know if they had enough soldiers left. The doctor provided the statistics. But imagine the power this gave him. He held the power of quarantine in one hand and the power of the record book in the other. If he liked you, perhaps he would not see the black spot. Perhaps he would say it was just a fever. Perhaps he would let you leave the city. If he disliked you, or if you had no money. The cane pointed down. The door was nailed shut. This immense power led to a dark reality. The doctor was supposed to be a neutral observer. But humans are rarely neutral when money is involved. Corruption began to seep into the system. Corruption. This implies dishonest or fraudulent conduct by those in power, typically involving bribery. People began to whisper that the doctors could be bought. A bag of coins might save your house from being locked up. A bribe might change the diagnosis on the official record. The mask, which was designed to keep the sickness out, was now hiding something else. It was hiding the face of a man who could be bribed. The public trust began to crack. The figure in the waxed coat was no longer just a scary symbol of death. He was becoming a symbol of tyranny. And as the summer heat grew, and the smell of the city became unbearable, the people began to wonder, is the doctor actually helping us? Or is he part of the problem? Is it possible that the doctor himself is spreading the disease? The cane taps on the cobblestones. The doctor moves to the next house. But behind him, the curtains twitch. Eyes are watching, and they are not friendly. Thud. A stone hits the doctor's leather coat. It bounces off the waxed surface and clatters onto the street. The doctor stops. He grips his cane tighter. He turns his glass eyes toward the shadows of the alley. He does not see a rat. He sees a group of angry men. They are not asking for medicine anymore. They are shouting insults. Poisoner! Murderer! Crow! The atmosphere has shifted. The silence of fear has been replaced by the noise of rage. In part 3, we saw the doctor as a judge. Now, we see him as a suspect. Why would the people attack the only man trying to save them? To understand this, we must look at the economics of the plague. For the city, the plague was a disaster. Trade stopped. Taxes vanished. But for the plague doctor, the epidemic was a golden age. Being a plague doctor was lucrative. Let's pause on this word, lucrative. Lucrative means producing a great deal of profit. A job that pays very well is lucrative. Selling umbrellas in the desert is not lucrative. Selling umbrellas in London is very lucrative. Before the plague, many of these doctors were poor or second-rate. Before the plague, many of these doctors were poor or second-rate. Suddenly, the city council was offering them huge salaries. They were given free housing. They were given food. They were given a level of respect they had never earned before. But here is the dark logic that the citizens began to notice. If the plague ends, the doctor loses his job. He loses his salary. He loses his power. Therefore, the people whispered, the doctor wants the plague to continue. This suspicion grew into paranoia. Rumors spread that the doctors were actually infecting people on purpose to keep the money flowing. In Milan, during the plague of 1630, this fear exploded. People believed in the Untori, the Anointers. These were legendary villains who supposedly smeared poisonous ointments on door handles and walls to spread the disease. Because the plague doctor carried weird powders and sticky syrups, he fit the description of the villain perfectly. He became a scapegoat. This is a vital cultural term. Scapegoat. A scapegoat is a person who is blamed for the wrongdoings, mistakes, or faults of others. When a society is terrified and cannot fight the real enemy, the invisible bacteria, they find a visible enemy, the doctor, to blame. The doctor was the perfect scapegoat. He looked scary. He dealt with death. And he was getting rich while everyone else was getting poor. The mask, designed to protect him from the air, now protected him from the hate in the eyes of his neighbors. But the danger wasn't just from the mob. It was from the contract itself. The contracts signed by these doctors were often grim. They tell us a story of desperation. Historians have found contracts from European cities that included special clauses. The city would pay the doctor a high monthly wage, yes, but they also promised a pension to his widow. Why mention the widow? Because everyone knew the doctor was going to die. Despite the leather, despite the herbs, despite the cane, the mortality rate for plague doctors was incredibly high. In Venice, during one outbreak, 18 doctors were hired. By the end of the year, only one was left alive. 5 had died. 12 had fled in terror. This is the irony of the lucrative job. You were paid a fortune, but you likely wouldn't live long enough to spend it. So, the figure walking down the street is not a villain, and he is not a hero. He is a man caught in a trap. He is trapped by the suit, trapped by the expectations of the city, trapped by the anger of the mob, and trapped by the invisible killer that is waiting for one small mistake. He walks faster now. The stones are flying more frequently. He needs to get to the lazaretto. The lazaretto is the quarantine island, the place where the sick are sent to die. It is the heart of the nightmare. And it is the only place where the doctor is truly the king. But what happens inside the walls of the lazaretto is worse than anything on the street. The heavy wooden gates slam shut. The lock clicks. The noise of the angry mob is gone. The shouting has stopped. But the silence here is worse. Our doctor has entered the lazaretto. He stands in a vast courtyard. Around him are long, open halls filled with rows of beds, or rather, rows of straw mats. There are hundreds of people here. Some are screaming, some are praying. Most are silent, waiting for the end. The air is thick, hot, and stagnant. 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 This is a descriptive adjective. It usually refers to water or air that does not move and smells bad. In the lazaretto, the atmosphere is stagnant with despair. In part 4, we saw the doctor facing the anger of the streets. Now, we see the result of his work. The lazaretto was the ultimate solution to the plague. It was a specialized hospital, but hospital is the wrong word. A hospital is where you go to get better. The lazaretto was where you went to keep the city safe. It was a machine for segregation. Segregation. This noun means the action of setting someone or something apart from others. In history, we often hear this word regarding race or class. Here, it is biological segregation. The state decided that the only way to save the healthy body of the city was to cut off the infected limb. The concept started in Venice, Italy, in 1423. They built the first permanent plague hospital on a small island. They named it after St. Mary of Nazareth, or perhaps after Lazarus, the biblical figure associated with leprosy. Over time, the name morphed into lazaretto. By the 17th century, most major European cities had a version of this infrastructure. 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 This is a high-level vocabulary word. It refers to the basic physical and organizational structures needed for the operation of a society. Roads, bridges, and power lines are infrastructure. The lazaretto was medical infrastructure. It was a massive undertaking. Governments spent huge amounts of money to build these walls. They were symbols of the state's power to organize chaos. But for the doctor standing in the courtyard, it is a nightmare. His job here is different. On the street, he is a scout. Here, he is a warden. He walks down the rows of the dying. His leather coat squeaks. He uses his cane to point at the bodies. Dead. Dead. Still alive. Servants follow him, dragging the bodies away to the pits. The doctor is the only authority figure inside these walls. The priests are often too scared to enter. The family members are locked outside. The doctor is the bridge between the living world and this purgatory. 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 In religious terms, Purgatory is a place of suffering, inhabited by the souls of sinners who are expiating their sins before going to heaven. In common English, we use it to describe a state of waiting and suffering. The lazaretto is a purgatory on earth. Why did society accept this? Why did families let their loved ones be taken to these hellholes? Because of fear, and because of the promise of containment. The mask of the doctor and the walls of the lazaretto served the same purpose. They were barriers. They promised that the horror could be contained in a box. If we put the sick in a box, the sickness stays there. If we put the doctor in a suit, he stays safe. But biology is rarely so obedient. As the doctor works, a strap on his leather boot comes loose. A small tear appears in the seam of his glove. He does not notice it yet. He is tired. He has been breathing the fume of cloves and myrrh for 12 hours. He is dehydrated. The system, the city council, the guards, the walls, is designed to be perfect. But the human element is weak. And inside the lazaretto, the concentration of the disease is overwhelming. The air is not just bad, as the Miasma Theory says. It is thick with the bacteria Yersinia pestis. The fleas are hopping from the cold bodies of the dead to the warm bodies of the living. They are looking for a new host. And the man in the bird mask, despite his leather shell, is warm. The sun sets over the walls of the quarantine station. The doctor finishes his rounds. He feels a strange ache in his legs. A headache begins to throb behind his eyes. He tells himself it is just the heat. He tells himself it is just the weight of the mask. But deep down, a new fear begins to rise. A fear that no amount of money or authority can silence. What if the barrier has been breached? The sun rises, but the doctor does not. He is lying on his cot in the small room reserved for the medical staff. The leather coat is hanging on a hook on the wall. The beak mask stares at him from the table. For the first time in our story, we see his face. He is not a monster. He is not a bird. He is a young man, pale and sweating. His hands are shaking. He tries to sit up, but the room spins. A sharp pain stabs him in the groin. He reaches down with trembling fingers. He feels a lump. It is hard, the size of an egg, and painful to the touch. It is the bubo, the signature of the plague. The shield has failed. In part 5, we walked through the lazaretto. Now, we witness the collapse of the doctor's authority. The man who was the symbol of safety is now a victim. This is a moment of profound irony. Irony. This is a literary and situational concept you must know. Irony happens when the result is the opposite of what was expected. The firefighter's house burns down. That is irony. The doctor, dressed in the ultimate protective suit, dying of the disease he fights. That is a tragic irony. How did it happen? Perhaps a flea jumped into his boot. Perhaps he touched his eye after touching a patient. Perhaps the impermeable suit had a tiny crack. It proves that the 17th century methods were fallible. Fallible. This adjective describes something or someone capable of making mistakes or failing. Humans are fallible. Their inventions are fallible. The beak mask looked terrifying and perfect, but it was scientifically fallible. It was based on the wrong theory, bad air, so it missed the real threat, fleas. As the fever rises, the doctor enters a state of delirium. Delirium is a disturbed state of mind characterized by restlessness, illusions, and incoherent thought. It is often caused by high fever. In his delirium, the doctor might hallucinate. He might see the beak mask talking to him. He might hear the church bells ringing inside his head. This marks the transition from the controller to the controlled. Previously, he controlled the fate of others. He wrote names in the ledger. He pointed the cane. Now another doctor will come. Another man in the mask will point a cane at him. He would be moved from the staff quarters to the general ward. He will become just another number in the weekly bill of mortality. This leveling effect was one of the most frightening aspects of the plague. It did not care about your uniform. It did not care about your title. It stripped away your social status and left you as just a biological organism. Vulnerable. This is the key word for this moment. To be vulnerable means to be exposed to the possibility of being attacked or harmed. The suit was an attempt to hide human vulnerability. It was a costume of invincibility. But underneath the wax and leather, the human was always there. The doctor looks at the mask one last time. It sits on the table, lifeless. Without the man inside, it is just scraps of leather and glass. It looks ridiculous now. A toy. A failed experiment. But even as this doctor dies, the image of the mask does not die. In fact, it becomes stronger. Why? Because the city needs the symbol. Even if the individual doctor fails, the idea of the plague doctor must continue. The city council hires a replacement immediately. A new man arrives. He puts on the same coat. He puts on the same mask. To the public on the street, it looks like the doctor never died. The figure is eternal. The man inside is disposable. Disposable. This means something intended to be used once or for a short time and then thrown away. The individual human was disposable. The symbol of order was permanent. This is a dark lesson in how societies manage chaos. They value the system more than the person. The door to the doctor's room opens. 2 guards enter. They are wearing cloths over their faces. They do not look the doctor in the eye. They pick him up. He is too weak to fight. He is too weak to speak. They carry him out into the courtyard of the lazaretto. The sun is bright and blinding. They lay him down on a straw mat next to a fisherman and a baker. The leather coat stays on the hook, waiting for the next occupant. The doctor closes his eyes. The smell of herbs, cloves and myrrh is gone. All he can smell now is the dust. But while the doctor's story ends here, the legacy of his costume is just beginning. The plague will eventually fade, but the image of the beak doctor will not. It will transform. It will change from a medical tool into something else, something theatrical, something tied to the spirit of the carnival. How did the symbol of death become a symbol of a party? The church bells stop ringing. The red crosses fade from the doors. The rats return to the sewers. Time passes. The Great Plague of London, 1665, ends. The outbreaks in Italy fade away. The crisis is over. But the mask does not disappear. It migrates. It travels from the silent, deadly streets of the infected city to the loud, brightly lit stages of the theatre. It travels from the hospital to the ballroom. In Part 6, we watched the doctor die. In Part 7, we watch him be reborn as a character. Welcome to Venice. the city of water and masks. But this is not a quarantine island anymore. It is the carnival. Carnival. In history, carnival, or carnevale, was the season of feasting and celebration before the fasting of Lent. It was a time when social rules were broken. Poor people dressed as kings, men dressed as women, and the terrified citizens dressed as the thing they feared most, the plague doctor. This is a fascinating psychological shift. Why would you dress up as a symbol of death for a party? It is an act of defiance. Defiance means open resistance or bold disobedience. By wearing the mask, the people were saying to death, "You did not kill me. I am still here. I am laughing at you." This brings us to a crucial English concept: satire. Satire is the use of humor, irony, or exaggeration to criticize or mock something. Usually, we satirize politicians or kings, but in Venice, they satirized the trauma of the plague. The terrifying figure of the doctor was turned into a caricature. A caricature is a drawing or description that exaggerates specific features to look funny or grotesque. In the theater style known as commedia dell'arte, the doctor became a buffoon. The beak became impossibly long. The glasses became huge and silly. He was no longer the scary authority figure, often portrayed as greedy, incompetent, or foolish. The crowd laughed at him.
"Look at the doctor,"
they would shout.
"He shakes his cane, but he cannot cure a cold."
Laughter is a defense mechanism. It destroys fear. If you can laugh at the monster loses its power. This is often called gallows humor. Gallows humor is grim, ironic humor in desperate or hopeless situations. The gallows is the wooden frame used to hang criminals. When the survivors wore the beak mask to dance in the streets, they were engaging in the ultimate gallows humor. But something else happened. During this transition, the mask became beautiful. The original medical mask was rough, smelly leather. It was ugly. It was functional. The carnival mask, Medico della Peste, was made of porcelain or papier-mâché. Painted white, it was decorated with gold leaf or crystals. It became an object of aesthetics. Aesthetics refers to principles concerned with the nature and appreciation of beauty. The doctor's striking geometric look became a fashion statement. The anti-miasma suit became a style icon. Imagine the scene at a Venetian ball in the 18th century. The music plays, violins and cellos. The room fills with silk and velvet. A figure glides through the crowd, a long black cloak and pristine white beak. He does not smell of vinegar and death. Instead, expensive perfume. He carries his stick to pose elegantly, not push away bodies. He is anonymous. This is the power of the persona. A persona is the aspect of character presented to or perceived by others. It comes from the Latin word for mask. When you wear the mask, you adopt a new persona, mysterious, dangerous. Not a shopkeeper or banker anymore. You are the Grim Reaper, but safe. However, this transformation had a cost. As the mask became a party costume, the reality of the history was lost. The suffering of the victims, the desperation of the real doctors, the smell of the lazaretto, all of it was polished away. The symbol survived, but the meaning changed. It became romanticized. To romanticize is to describe it in an idealized fashion. making it seem better or more appealing than it really was. We romanticize pirates, the Wild West, and the plague doctor. Today, in Venice shops, hundreds of these masks hang on walls. Tourists buy them as souvenirs. But look closely at the eyes of the mask. They are still hollow. The beak is still sharp. Covered in glitter and gold, the shape remains a warning. It's a ghost from when humanity stood on the edge of extinction. And as we moved into the modern era, the mask changed again. It stopped being funny. It stopped being a party trick. The 20th and 21st centuries remembered the fear. Writers and filmmakers saw a bird-like silhouette, not a doctor, but a monster. In the next part, we will explore how the plague doctor became a villain in modern pop culture and why he still scares us today. The lights flicker, the steam hisses from a pipe, a shadow moves across the wall. It is the 21st century. You are playing a video game, or perhaps watching a horror movie. You turn a corner in the digital world, and there he is. The beak, the black coat, the cane. But this time, he is not a tragic figure trying to fight the plague. He is not a partygoer in Venice. He is the villain. He is holding a syringe filled with glowing green liquid. He is not here to cure you. He is here to experiment on you. In Part 7, we saw the doctor become a joke. In Part 8, the pendulum swings back. He becomes a nightmare. Why has modern pop culture turned the plague doctor into a monster? It connects to steampunk, a subgenre of science fiction. It features steam-powered technology, usually set in a fantasy 19th century Victorian era. Think of brass gears, goggles, and steam engines. The plague doctor fits perfectly into this world. His mask looks like a primitive gas mask. His leather coat like industrial protective gear. He looks like a scientist from a dark, alternative timeline. He represents science without humanity. We call this a literary trope. A trope is a common or overused theme or device in movies and books. The mad scientist is a famous trope. The plague doctor has become the ultimate mad scientist. Writers and game designers realized that the mask is uncanny. Uncanny. Uncanny is a fantastic word for horror. It describes something strange or mysterious, unsettling. Often things look almost human, but not quite. The mask has two eyes, like a human. It has a nose, the beak, like a face. But it doesn't move. It doesn't blink. It is uncanny. When you look at a human face, you look for micro-expressions. Is he smiling? Is he angry? Is he sad? The mask hides all of that. You cannot read the doctor's intent. Intent. This noun means intention or purpose. Because the mask hides the intent, our brains panic. We assume the worst. We assume he is hiding a lack of emotion. In modern horror stories, the plague doctor often speaks calmly while doing terrible things. He views humans as subjects to be cured, even if the cure kills them. This reflects a deep, modern fear. We are no longer afraid of the miasma. We understand bacteria now. But we are afraid of the medical system becoming cold and mechanical. We fear being just a number in a file. We fear doctors who care more about the experiment than the patient. The plague doctor symbolizes that fear. He is the cold, unfeeling authority who says, "Trust me, this is for your own good," while holding a rusty saw. He has become an omen. An omen is a sign believed to be a warning of the future, like a black cat crossing your path. Seeing the beak doctor in a movie is an omen of death. He appears before the disaster. He is the harbinger of the infection. There is also a fascinating shift in his tools. Remember the stick? The white cane used to gently lift the clothes. In modern versions, the cane becomes a weapon, containing a sword or jagged surgical tools. Aromatic herbs are replaced by poisonous gas. The character has become malevolent. Malevolent. This adjective means having or showing a wish to do evil to others. The historical doctors were usually desperate, greedy, or brave. They were rarely malevolent. But the Hollywood version is almost always evil. He is the angel of death. Here's the most surprising part. When the plague doctor became a solid villain, Halloween masks, video games, reality suddenly caught up with fiction. The year 2020 arrived. Suddenly, images of masks, gloves, and distance weren't just history or video games. They were on the news, in our supermarkets. The plague doctor stopped being a distant monster, becoming a familiar reflection. People made memes, even wore beak masks to grocery stores as dark jokes. The ancient symbol of control was suddenly relevant again. In the next part, we will leave the fiction behind. We will look at the striking parallels between the 17th century response and our modern world. We will see that while the technology has changed, human nature has not. How did the red cross on the door become the ping on your phone? History doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes. This famous quote suggests that while the details change, the patterns of human behavior remain the same. In Part 8, we saw the plague doctor turn into a movie monster. But in Part 9, we are going to look at something much more frightening. We are going to look at the parallels between the 17th century and our own modern lives. A parallel is a person or thing that is similar or analogous to another. When we place two lines side by side, they are parallel. When we place the events of 1665 next to the events of the 2020s, the parallels are shocking. Let's go back to the city gate of London in 1665. A merchant is trying to leave. He has his wagon packed. He wants to flee to the countryside. But a guard blocks his path with a pike, a long spear. "Where are your papers?" the guard asks. The merchant fumbles in his coat. He pulls out a crumpled piece of parchment. It is a certificate of health. It is signed by the Lord Mayor. It proves that he comes from a house that is free of infection. Without this paper, he cannot travel. He cannot stay in an inn. He is a prisoner in his own city. Does this sound familiar? In the last few years, the world learned new terms: vaccine passports, green passes, and QR codes. The technology changed from parchment to smartphones, but the mechanism of control remained exactly the same. This is the machinery of bureaucracy. Bureaucracy. This is a noun referring to a system of government in which most of the important decisions are made by state officials rather than by elected representatives. It often implies complex rules, paperwork, and red tape. The plague doctor was an agent of this bureaucracy. He wasn't just a healer, he was a certifier. His signature on a document could grant you freedom, or his diagnosis could lock you away. This power created a culture of surveillance. Surveillance. This comes from the French word meaning watching over. It describes the close observation of people, especially those suspected of being diseased or dangerous. In 1665, London used searchers of the dead. These were usually older, poor women who were paid to inspect dead bodies and report the cause of death to the parish clerks. They were the eyes of the state. If they saw a blue spot or a bubo, the alarm was raised. The doctor was called. The door was locked. Today, we have contact tracing apps. We have thermal cameras in airports. We have data tracking. The method of surveillance has become digital, but the goal is the same: to identify the clean and the unclean. This constant watching creates a specific psychological state in the population: paranoia. Paranoia is a mental condition characterized by delusions of persecution or unwarranted jealousy. In general use, it means intense, irrational suspicion or mistrust of others. In the 17th century, neighbors watched neighbors. If you heard coughing through the wall, you might report it to the authorities to save yourself. Is he sick? Is she hiding a victim? This broke the bonds of community. Trust evaporated. The plague doctor, with his mask, was the ultimate symbol of this mistrust. He did not show his face because he did not trust the air you breathed. And you did not trust him because he represented the power that could destroy your life. However, there is a positive side to this comparison. It shows us the resilience of humanity. Resilience. This is a beautiful and strong word. It is the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties. Toughness. Despite the horror of 1665, despite the locked doors, the mass graves, and the terrible doctors, London survived. The city did not die. People adapted. They found ways to communicate through windows. They wrote letters. They played music. They endured the isolation until the bells stopped ringing. The plague doctor eventually took off his mask. The certificate of health was thrown into the fire. The gates opened. But this leads us to the final chapter of our story. What happens when the mask comes off? When the crisis is over, how does a society heal from the trauma of silence and separation? And what is the final lesson that the Beak Doctor teaches us across the centuries? He is more than just a Halloween costume. He is a warning about the fragility of our world. Let's move to the conclusion. Let's remove the mask. The year is 1666. A spark ignites in a bakery on Pudding Lane in London. A massive fire sweeps through the city. It burns the timber houses, it burns the dirty straw, and, crucially, it burns the rats and the fleas. The Great Fire of London destroys the city, but it also cleanses it. The plague retreats. Somewhere in a small room, a man takes off a heavy leather coat. He peels off the sweaty gloves. He unbuckles the strap behind his head and pulls the beak mask off his face. He takes a deep breath of fresh air. The air smells of smoke and ash, but it does not smell of death. The nightmare is over. Welcome to the final chapter of the London Gritty Chronicles. We have traveled a long road together. We started on a silent street in part 1. We looked inside the beak in part 2. We felt the strike of the cane in part 3. We saw the greed, the quarantine, the theatre, and the modern monster. Now we must ask, what is the legacy of the plague doctor? Legacy. And this is a noun, meaning something transmitted by or received from an ancestor or predecessor from the past. It is what remains after the person is gone. The legacy of the plague doctor is complex. From a medical perspective, his legacy is failure. He did not cure the plague. His theories about miasma were wrong. His theriac syrup was useless. But from a social perspective, his legacy is powerful. He represents the human need to do something in the face of disaster. When the world fell into anarchy, society created a uniform. They created a set of rules. They created a figure who, even if he couldn't save you, stood witness to your suffering. Anarchy. This is a state of disorder due to absence or non-recognition of authority. The plague threatened to turn the city into anarchy. The doctor was the symbol of order. Today we look at the mask, and we feel a mix of fear and curiosity. It reminds us of a time when we were helpless against nature. It reminds us that civilization is a thin layer of ice over a deep, dark ocean. But it also reminds us of human ingenuity. Ingenuity. This is the quality of being clever, original, and inventive. Even when they were terrified, humans designed a suit to protect themselves. They invented systems to track the disease. They didn't just give up and die. They tried to fight back with the tools they had. The beak mask is an artifact. An artifact is an object made by a human being, typically an item of cultural or historical interest. This specific artifact tells us that we have always been afraid of the invisible. Whether it is a miasma, a demon, or a virus, we try to build barriers. We try to put a mask between us and the danger. So, the next time you see a picture of a plague doctor, do not just see a monster. Do not just see a Halloween costume. See the man inside. See the sweat running down his face. See the shaking hand holding the stick. See the fear in his eyes behind the glass circles. He is not so different from us. He is just a person trying to survive the storm, hoping that the mask will keep him safe until the morning comes. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the shadows of history. You have learned about miasma, quarantine, scapegoats, and resilience. You have built your English vocabulary by exploring the darkest corners of the past. History is not just dates and names. It is the story of how we handle fear. And sometimes, looking at a scary mask helps us see our own faces more clearly. This is the London Gritty Chronicles. Class dismissed.